Hi, here we are. This is level B of the hypothalamo-pituitary-gonadal axis. Not as scary as you think. This presentation is designed for those who already have a basic understanding of the endocrine system, and therefore we can go a little bit deeper into this axis. Give me about 5 minutes, and then we'll be done. Okay, here we go. Hypothalamo-pituitary-gonadal axis. First, we're going to talk about the functions of the involved glands, and then we'll get right to it and talk about the hypothalamo-pituitary-gonadal axis, what it is, and what its functions are, specifically during puberty and with exercise, and we'll round it out by talking about some sex differences in this axis. So let's talk about this axis, hypothalamo-pituitary-gonadal axis. It all starts with the hypothalamus. That is, of course, an endocrine gland up in the brain. Hanging down from the hypothalamus would be the pituitary glands. We see it down here. Hypothalamus is up here, anterior and posterior pituitary gland. The hypothalamus, one of its main functions is to oversee the anterior and posterior pituitary glands. Because the pituitary glands secrete so many hormones, because the hypothalamus oversees it, this is one reason why the hypothalamus exerts a significant amount of control over hormones in the body and is therefore considered a master control center within the endocrine system. The hypothalamus itself, I'm not sure if you can see this little update. I'm going to say remind me later, and we're going to keep recording. Okay. Hypothalamus itself produces two hormones, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. That's not going to be the function of our talk. In addition, the hypothalamus plays other roles within the body, including it is our thermoregulatory center and our thirst and hunger center, but we're going to focus here on the hormonal functions. Hanging down from the hypothalamus would be the pituitary glands. We're most concerned with the anterior pituitary gland, which is connected to the hypothalamus via blood vessels. That is how, through blood vessels, the hypothalamus communicates with the anterior pituitary gland. The posterior pituitary gland is going to be communicating with the hypothalamus via nerve impulses. The anterior pituitary gland secretes a bunch of hormones. Here are 5 of those that are secreted and released by the anterior pituitary gland. Here we can see a good look at this axis. Hypothalamus oversees the anterior pituitary gland, which releases a bunch of hormones that have effects all over the body. Quick review. Some of these from the anterior pituitary gland include thyroid-stimulating hormone. Travels to the thyroid gland, stimulates release of thyroid hormone, which increases metabolism. Luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormones released by the anterior pituitary gland go to the gonads and will stimulate growth of reproductive organs as well as release of sex hormones. Growth hormone, of course, functions to produce growth as well as other things within the muscles, bones, and tissues. And then adrenocorticotropin hormone goes to the adrenal cortex gland and stimulates it to release cortisol, which is one of the body's natural anti-inflammatories. The last end of this axis would be the testes, so hypothalamo-pituitary-gonadal axis. In males, it would be the testes. In females, it would be the ovary. Of course, these are the gonads. In the female, the ovary will produce the egg, and there'll be a release of estrogen and progesterone. In the males, the testes produce sperm, and there's a release of testosterone. Here's an up-close look at the ovary. Here's the developing oocyte. Egg is released at ovulation. Great. And here is a testes. All these coils produce sperm, and in addition, the testes is going to produce and secrete testosterone. Let's put it all together. Hypothalamo-pituitary-gonadal axis. What is it? Interconnecting functions of these glands and hormones. They work together in a direct link. Hypothalamus oversees the anterior pituitary gland, which releases certain hormones that have effects on the body, including the gonads. One period or one time when this axis is very active is during puberty. So what happens during puberty? This is when we're going to actually start to see the release of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. Before puberty, these are not going to be released. It is only upon their release that they trigger growth in the testes and ovaries, which then triggers release of the sex hormones and triggers all the beautiful things that we remember as puberty. Specifically, testosterone is going to have androgenic effects, growth of sex hormones in the male, testes and penis, and stimulate stimulate the development of male secondary sex characteristics, such as deepening of the voice and hair growth. The anabolic effects of testosterone involve muscle building, muscle protein synthesis. Of course, the females are going to produce some testosterone, but not nearly as much as the males. The females are going to produce majorly estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen is going to develop female secondary sex characteristics, lightening of the skull, development of breast tissue, etc. It is also believed that estrogen has some protective effects at muscle, which can very well be beneficial. Here we can see a nice schematic of how this axis works together. At puberty, hypothalamus directs the anterior pituitary gland to release luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, which go to the gonads, stimulate them, which will stimulate release of testosterone and estrogen. Of course, there are big sex differences. Prior to or during adolescence, prior to puberty, the amount of testosterone between males and females is pretty much the same. At puberty is when it changed. Females experience a 4-fold increase in testosterone at puberty. Males experience a 10 to 20-fold increase of testosterone at puberty. This is the reason why men have so much more testosterone and able to develop more muscle growth than their biologically female counterparts. How does this axis work during and after exercise? So here we go. We're going to talk first about testosterone, which is going to come from the testes as a result of stimulation of LH and FSH, which is stimulated its release from the anterior pituitary gland with instructions from the hypothalamus. Not only does testosterone, of course, lead to protein synthesis within the muscle, testosterone also has an effect on growth hormone. So testosterone goes way up here to promote release of growth hormone, which then goes to the liver to promote release of insulin-like growth factor 1 and 2, which then goes on to cause even further protein synthesis at the muscle. We can talk about thyroid stimulating hormone. We need that to increase metabolic rate during exercise. Growth hormone itself, not only does it do the protein synthesis, growth hormone can also promote burning of fat for energy. And in that way, it spares glucose, which is a good thing. We like to spare glucose to have it extra in the tank when we need quick energy. We like to spare glucose because fat gives us much more energy, much more bang for the buck. Growth hormone also will stimulate gluconeogenesis, which is production of glucose from non-glucose sources. Fantastic, that thing. Then we lastly have adrenocorticotropin hormone, which stimulates release of cortisol from the adrenal cortex. This is only going to be released during exercise, during prolonged bouts, where we rely on some anti-inflammatory effects. Interestingly enough, ACTH and cortisol can therefore also spare glucose, which we like. Here we can see again that chain with testosterone. Hypothalamus, anterior pituitary leads to growth hormone, liver, IGF, all of which is going to increase protein metabolism and promote fat burning. After exercise, growth hormone stays active. We need to rebuild the muscle tissue that was broken down. And this is when we really see the biggest release of cortisol. Cortisol is going to break down muscle tissue that's been used and therefore can be rebuilt back up. Some sex differences, not surprising. As a result of increased testosterone, males have much more greater strength than females, specifically as it relates to upper body. Males lifted an average of 40% greater weight in the snatch category, which is the only weight category of the Olympic lifting that is the same for males and females at 69 kilograms. So the males exhibit greater absolute work and power output. However, when that lifted amount is compared to body composition, the workload, amount lifted, and efficiency is similar between the sexes. We can see here a great lit review by Thibault et al. Upper body dominated events. There's a greater advantage for males over females. Lower body dominated and activities that are longer in length, females are closer to males. That's it. Hope you enjoyed the talk. Not so bad, right?